What I want to do in this segment is chat about inevitability when you make a coaching change. And I think a lot is made of the timing of coaching changes and the way they're made. And people say, we got to save the recruiting class. Well, in a perfect world, yeah, you would save the recruiting class. But the fact of the matter is, when you change a coach, recruiting classes change. Some players are committed to this coach or that coach, or they're comfortable with this coach, and he moves, and things change in the world of recruiting, especially when you change the head coach. So it's something you understand you're taking on when you change head coaching. Your recruiting class very likely will suffer. Doesn't mean that a new coach can't come in and either keep some of the old commits or get some new ones in. Doesn't mean that everyone's going to decommit. Doesn't mean your best player is going to decommit. It just means things are going to change. That's just the nature of recruiting. I mean, when you visited schools, I know LSU was always the top of your list, but I would imagine the coaches that were recruiting you were a pretty big influence on what you were trying to look for in a school.
Oh, yeah, it's probably the only thing you're looking for, because those are the guys that are going to be coaching you for the next 3 or 4 years. You're going to be around them every day. You're going to spend more time around those coaches than you do your family. So that relationship is huge, especially for young 17, 16, 18-year-old kids. A lot of them who've just lived with their parents, it's going to be their first time, going outside of their home. And that's a big, big jump for a lot of people. So you want to have people around you that you trust, a lot of people who have your best interests at heart. And I know for a lot of these kids, Coach O was that for them. They felt really comfortable with Coach O being the head guy at LSU, and that's probably why a lot of these kids committed there. So it's definitely a tough blow, but as an administration, as an athletic department, you got to make the tough decisions, and that's the decision that they wanted to make. So going forward, the benefits of that decision, and what's going to be some negatives. So I think the best course of action at this point is getting a guy in that coaching staff or head coach that can really just be a jump up from Coach O and give these recruits a reason to stay, a reason to feel confident, a reason to, LSU, if this guy can coach LSU, he's definitely going to put me in position to be where I want to be 3 or 4 years from now. So we see what it's done. Now I just think you kind of wait this thing out until they get the next guy in there.
Now let's look at the class as it's constituted. One decommitment since Ed Ogeron was announced he wouldn't returning. Aaron Anderson, wide receiver from down there in New Orleans, has decommitted. He's now looking very strongly at Alabama. That makes me want to vomit, but it's part of the situation at hand. So you look at what they've got. They've got 14 commitments in this class right now. When you hear Shea Dixon from Go247 talk, hear Billy Embody, the guys that cover this for a living, they think that the strongest bonds in recruiting and the most likely players to end up at LSU are obviously the in-state guys. That is a fairly obvious statement. 9 of LSU's 14 commitments are from inside the state. So you've got to hope that Will Campbell, Walker Howard, and Emory Jones, who are probably your 3 most heralded recruits that are from inside the state, will hold this thing together and decide they want to be a part of it. That's where it starts. You were a part of a class that was very close in state. We've gone through the names a million times, but it's Lael, it's you, it's Trey Turner, it's Jarvis, it's Odell, it's Freak Johnson. That was your class, and there was a bond there that was formed that was like, we're going to go to LSU, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. That's something that we talked about from sophomores in high school, and they actually created a name for it to use in recruiting. It was the Fam.
The Fam.
Yeah. So that kind of name, that's I'm going to remember that forever, and it really became that. And I think I've seen that with Walker, and I've seen that with Will Campbell. They want to be the guys, getting guys to come to LSU, and they really believe in this LSU program and this football team. So you're going to need those guys to keep this class together. You check the rankings, you check where LSU is in recruiting. Those guys are pretty much holding the class where it is at this point. You lose those 2, this class looks totally different. So I think for this staff, continue to talk to these guys, continue to see where their head's at. If they want to be a Tiger and they want to, put that purple and gold on, allow those guys to continue to be, ambassadors for the program and try to really solidify this recruiting class.
And we saw Walker made a visit to South Bend, and you can bet that Will Campbell, his phone's blowing up. Trevonte Citizen, the running back out of Lake Charles, Emory Jones, and Catholic High here in Baton Rouge, big-time offensive linemen. You can bet their phones are going to be buzzing for the next few weeks because the schools outside smell blood in the water, and they have the ability to come in and make the high school player feel a little bit uncomfortable about what they're committing to. fact of the matter is that you don't make decisions at Scott Woodward's level moving forward thinking about Emory Jones or Will Campbell or Walker Howard. You find the right coach and trust that those are the guys that are going to be able to form the relationships in a quick amount of time to keep those guys around.
Yeah, you can't start stuff from the bottom up. You got to go
Yep.
from the top down, and I think that's what Woodward truly believes. If you just look at his track record, look at the people he's hired, he's never really gone after someone that he felt really doesn't have a good structure, really doesn't have a great infrastructure for their program. Those are all things that when he sits down and interviews these guys are going to be really important and really high on this list. You know, a goal-oriented guy who really runs a good program, and I trust Scott. I think he's going to do a great job in that department. I love that he's taking his time. I love that, you know, we think we know who the candidates are, but truly we probably have no idea who he's talking to. And I think that's the way you got to do something like this, because the more names that gets thrown into it just becomes a distraction, and it's just too much going on.
Now, the third ranked player in your class is from out of state. However, he happens to be your quarterback's brother. That helps.
Yeah.
Assuming that Max Johnson is happy and remains at LSU, which at that position, this is not a Max thing, this is a quarterback thing. I want to be very clear about that. Assuming that the quarterback is happy and doesn't move on, as quarterbacks tend to do, you've got a fairly good chance of keeping Jake Johnson in the bucket as well. And at that point, you're starting to keep the top end of your class together. Okay, well, who's from out of state? Well, you got a guy from Michigan. He's a kicker. So I don't know that he necessarily was locked in to Ed Ogeron, or, you know, that's a little bit of a different issue. Now, Greg McMahon is a brilliant coach. I don't know if he'll be back or not. He's had some great kickers. He's found great kickers. He's had a tremendous career in the NFL and in college football. He moves on. You may lose your kicker from Michigan, but is that going to destroy the program? I don't know that it necessarily would. It's not as if your top 3 commits are all from the state of Michigan. So I think as the class sits right now, would you like to have more than 14 commitments with the signing period coming up here in a couple of months? Yeah, you would. That's generally LSU's sitting there at about 18 or 19 at this point, and they're down there at 14, and you don't expect them to get many commitments. So you may be light on numbers come December signing period and have a coach come in December 1 or whatever it may be. Maybe you got to wait, but hopefully you can clean up a little bit in January and then go hit the transfer portal when things go nuts in the spring, which is probably where the majority, well, not the majority, a nice chunk of this incoming group is going to come from.
Yeah, and I love that new NCAA rule to help out some of these programs, especially I feel like they made that rule for us. You know, they got guys being ineligible, doesn't want to give them grants and stuff. At least you guys can give us a transfer portal rule in a situation like this year when you lose your head coach and you may not reach that 25 commitment level, and you're going to have guys hitting that transfer portal. I think the best line of approach for whatever coach comes in, really, if you can't get this recruiting class of 23, 24, 25 recruits, pound that transfer portal. Find guys who've played, you trust, who have good tape, and guys that you can, put in this offense or defense that really matches the system that you're going to run. Obviously, you see Mel Tucker, he did it at one of the highest levels you can do it at, over 20-something guys in one offseason.
Yep.
I think that may have to be the direction if this recruiting class continues to look the way it does.
I'm Very Important says in the Bayou Ford chat on YouTube, I think we have a coach named the Monday after the SEC championship game. And John DeLon says the target date for a new coach is probably the day after the Texas A&M game. The day after the Texas A&M game is a tough ask because of some of the names that we think LSU may pursue and where their teams currently sit in terms of making a push to win a conference this year, in terms of making the playoff this year. I mean, those are real goals for some of the coaches that we think LSU very well may be pursuing. So I think to have a coach who's preparing for a conference championship game with another team or preparing for a playoff. Now, if they lose their last 2, I'm just speaking in generalities. You're talking about an 8-3, 8-4 team. Okay, that may be a little different story, and maybe you can, but maybe your coach is shooting a little higher than that. And again, Scott Woodward may wait at that point. So I think there can be target dates. Do I necessarily think that the Monday after the Texas A&M game is the most likely? That seems to me to be a little quick.
Yeah, I think that's a little quick. I mean, we could be wrong. Like, who knows, other than Scott Woodward and the agents that he's talking to that are representing these coaches. But I think that's a little rich. I think you want to see how some of these coaches obviously finish out the season and really see where they take their programs. I think that has a little bit to do with it as well. And I think he wants to make the right decision. This is the biggest hire you can in the state, the highest paid state employee. You got to get this one right. It brings in the most money for the school, and you know how big this decision will be for Woodward and the crew. So I think they take their time with it. I think they don't rush it, and they find the true LSU guy who can put this program in the direction that it needs to go.
But I would just, I would caution you, don't gasp and throw your hands up every time a high school recruit decommits from LSU or switch to another school. That is just simply part of a coaching change. It's part of it. And we mentioned that LSU staff is going to be out on the road this week, and that Ogeron says he's still recruiting to LSU, and even said yesterday or Monday, I'm going to do it until that's my last day at LSU, and then I'll probably do it a little bit after that. We'll see how much of that is true, but it's just part of it. You move coaches, your recruiting class is going to suffer a little bit. It's not going to be as good as it could be if you had stability at your coaching staff. You got to count on the new guy coming in and mending those relationships and getting guys in the boat.